Yeah, we are now streaming on YouTube as well, apparently. So, just to reiterate, as far as we got earlier, that we're talking about video today in terms of citizen journalism and hyperlocal and things like that. And we have Dan from America. You're probably going to get bored of me saying that now, but it's quite exciting for us. And everybody else, I think, is from the UK. Ali, are you joining us from as far as Scotland? Ali, are you joining us from as far as Scotland?
Sorry, my microphone is muted there. Yeah, I'm from Edinburgh.
Ah, right, that's okay. Okay, yeah, I had that in my head for some reason. Okay, so Dan, maybe you could start us off by telling us. Well, the reason I noticed you and invited you is because you have started up the citizen journalism video community on Google Plus. So
right. You can hear me, right?
yeah.
Okay. It's something that I've been doing here in New Hampshire because of the role that New Hampshire plays in American politics and all the media coverage that is associated with that. I just took to the streets and took advantage of the fact that all these political candidates, presidential candidates, were essentially in my backyard. So I had quick, ready access to the likes of, Mitt Romney and various other candidates that came through, especially early last year, 2012. And as part of what I do, I really focused on the workflow of capturing a story, turning it around quickly, editing it, and getting it posted in relative short order. So at various times through the year, I concentrate on events such as a film festival here in Portsmouth called the New Hampshire Film Festival. Happens every October. And over the course of 4 or 5 days, not this most recent year because I just had a baby in September, but the previous year I generated 57 local interviews. I mean, none of them were over 1 or 2 minutes, but 57 interviews in 4 days.
Wow.
And was able to turn those out quickly because I took a very simple process and a consistent theme, which was, well, tell me who you are. What are you doing here at the film festival? What films do you like? Are you a filmmaker? What's your next project? Using the tools that I had available, I mean, I go out with this little camera and a rig like this, and I'll just interview. I'll turn the camera back at myself and I'll interview people with me in the shot, which changes the Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yep.
I don't know how that happened.
No. I think you were muted somehow. So just need to check that that doesn't happen. Was that anything to do with you by any chance?
I have no idea what happened there. It just did it on its own.
It said Dave was muting everybody. I don't know what that was about, but anyway. Oh right.
So
okay.
I don't know where I lost you.
Sorry. About 30 seconds ago. You were showing us the camera, so maybe you could pick up from there.
What I was getting at was that I turned the camera back on myself so that as a journalist or as a reporter, I'm putting myself in front of the frame as well, so that the viewer gets a sense for me as the common thread between all these stories. So as you, as researchers, as journalists, as individuals that are creating content, putting yourself in the frame simply draws people into you as that common thread between all the stories that you tell. It's not something that I've seen a lot of people do. Most of the interviews that I see are pointed away from you, and it's just the subject who is speaking to the camera. But I get a lot of positive feedback from that.
I was going to say, was that something you started doing at some point when you realised people weren't what? I mean, was it something you started doing, or have you always done it like that? And did you change your tactics? Or?
It was something that I started doing because I didn't like the process. It was purely from a workflow process. How do you get the questions into an on-the-spot interview and have it seem natural? So my solution to that was to simply turn the camera around and point it at myself. As I stand there next to whomever it is that I'm speaking with.
Yeah, because you're not then... You don't then have to think, okay, do I put the questions in a text thing, a text shot, screen grab before, or do I have to kind of dub something in or anything like that? It's all there in one... I guess a lot of the time it's all there in one shot, in one take.
Right. Dan, can I just ask a question?
Yes.
I mean, I've found with kind of hyperlocal blogs in general, a lot, in the UK especially, a lot of kind of people have asked, how can we believe what these people are saying, that they're not sort of lone nutters with a blog? And the answer to that has invariably been kind of that personal accountability. So, you know they're not a nutter because you know who they are, where they live. And do you think that's kind of why, an element of why you felt the need to include yourself in the shots? Do you see what I mean?
The community here, and I've taken a real focus. When I was first starting out, it was just on the city here, and it's a small city. Portsmouth, New Hampshire is a small city, about 20,000 people. And so people know each other, and people generally knew who I was anyway. But when they started seeing me interact with people, the other side to the approach is that it's disarming. And so when you are interviewing someone who's uncomfortable in front of the camera and you turn it around like this and you put yourself in the frame with them and they can see you side by side, it changes the way they interact, because then it's no longer them speaking to a camera lens, it's them speaking to you.
Yeah.
And so I go through a general process every time I interact with somebody. I ask them if they're camera shy, to kind of give them an out if they are camera shy and they don't want to be interviewed. But then I direct them to have the conversation between the two of us rather than the camera. I've just gotten really good at holding the camera up over my shoulder. Or after.
I mean, I've found people are kind of, if they're camera shy, it's why I've always got Audio Boo on standby, so I just do an audio interview rather, because you meet so many people who's like, oh, I haven't got my makeup on or whatever. But I mean, do you find that, like, because you're in the shots, you're kind of recognised now for what you do, so you're getting much more kind of approaches and openings because you're the common theme between it all. So they're like, oh, you're the guy who does the interviews. And
well, that has been, I have received that kind of recognition for the type of work that I've done over the past few years. But it's interesting to hear you say that you always have audio on standby, because that's now the direction that I'm looking to move in, especially with my day job. I work for a digital marketing and user experience agency here, and more businesses are looking for this type of video-based storytelling, and they're looking to video as a way of selling their services, selling their products. So it's difficult to get a really high-quality story with people who are inherently uncomfortable in front of the camera. They may not be uncomfortable when you just shoot images of them while they're doing their work, but if you sit them down and try to conduct an interview, it's like a deer caught in headlights. So I'm experimenting with how to tell those stories by capturing the audio separately, entirely separately, and then mixing down that story with a visual component made up of, images from what they do day to day.
Dan, John was just kind of noting that he'd like to make a point about audio as well. John Costa runs. Let me get this right. Well, tell you what, you introduce yourself, John.
Hi, yeah, I run Citizens Eye in Leicester for the last 5 years, and I just wanted to interject. There was an interesting point about audio there, where we try to interview a lot of people around YouTube, but because we work with a lot of marginalised groups like refugee and asylum seekers, ex-offenders, people with disabilities and stuff like that, we've found that having Audio Boo on board as a partner has been really useful, because what it allows you to do is always capture what's going on, and then if it's relevant, then film it. And I think, having an iPhone or an iPad and stuff like that, that's really helped us to be able to never miss the opportunity to capture a really good quote or a really good story to share. And then we kind of toss up between, is it good enough to use just as audio alone, is it more powerful, or should we use the YouTube version? And there's many times that we've used only Audio Boo rather than YouTube, because it actually comes across more powerful when you listen to it.
I think,
Interesting.
I mean, with Audio Boo, I've been playing with it a bit, and what you can do is, if you subscribe to your Audio Boos through iTunes, you get the MP3s, and then if you want to do kind of say what Dan's doing and make a little kind of audio like an audio slideshow, so you're using images on top of that audio just to make it a bit visually sort of arresting, then you could just sort of grab some pictures and overlay it. I found an awful lot of people aren't comfortable with their image online, especially kind of with marginalised groups as well. There's still that fear of being online, and somehow, the African tribe that thought if you had your photo taken, it would take a piece of your soul. It's almost like that. If a video of you goes on the internet, it's a piece of you. But audio space.
Well, the building where we're based, and we have our newsroom and our community media training school, is a place that works with a lot of people that are sort of long-term unemployed and with learning disabilities and stuff like that. So we've built a lot of a bit like Dan was saying there about being seen in the film all the time, builds that credibility. People now know that I'm Citizens Eye, and it's really difficult after 5 years to turn around and say, but Simon's now the editor, and move on and stuff and establish that. And I think what they like you to do is the fact that they trust you. Ultimately, I think, it's about building your credibility, and what you're trying to build with your platform, Citizens Eye, is that people come to you and say, people come to me and say, can you break this story? Can you film me and break this story? And I go, that's not what we do. You know what I mean? That's what the mainstream media is for. Let them promote your piece in the Daily Mail or the Leicester Mercury, and then we'll keep it alive and allow you to interact in it and create content that you can then use around your campaign on Audio Boo or YouTube, and photographs through Flickr, or comments that you can put on Facebook yourself. And I think it's about knowing why you do what you do as a citizens journalist, as opposed to, I'm not trying to make Citizens Eye alongside the Mercury and BBC Radio Leicester. If people choose to think of us that way, that's their choice. We know very much what we're about, which is mobilising the marginalised. That's the term that we use, giving them a platform.
John, just before we go over to Frenzy in a second, without meaning to sound funny, where are you from originally? Is your accent a Leicester accent?
No, I'm from London.
Exactly. So I would have thought
I'm a foreigner.
Where Dan has the kind of thing of his face being the thing that sets him apart in the video. Maybe in your audio work, when you pose a question, people start to recognise your voice because it's the non-Leicester voice. You know what I mean?
Well, I think a lot of people in Leicester know the backstory to Citizens Eye. I've been running it virtually 5 years to the day, and I set it up when I came out of prison. I've been in the army, I've been around the world, I've ran a camp for Camp America, set up tourism organisations, and I found myself through a dodgy mortgage advisor in prison for 3 months. And I came out, and to do something online was more of a way of never owning anything that anyone could ever steal again, and having been bankrupt a couple of times. And so literally, it's really weird, because I've just done a brand audit on Citizens Eye, and someone tried to value it, and it has no value to me. because no one could ever write me a check what it meant to me. And therefore, when you help people that are carers or are refugee and asylum seekers or have a disability or are long-term unemployed or are, you know, marginalised or excluded for whatever reason, you suddenly have a common affinity. And, you know, we find that, you know, gypsies and travellers suddenly have more in common with someone who is a refugee and asylum seeker than they ever realise, because we try and collaborate on the things that are important to us, whether that's around, you know, safety, work, education, you know, voting rights, what is democracy, and we celebrate our differences. And we've been quite successful in Leicester in doing that from a community cohesion point of view, because we say that it exists, but it doesn't. We all know that it's smoke and mirrors, and so we try and work out the reason why we still get on. And I think Citizens Eye has managed to get itself to the point where the moment I realised about 3 weeks ago that it wasn't about the Citizens Eye website, it was about the fact that we'd set up a community training school. The training school is the catalyst, and film using YouTube is still the most common catalyst for us to be able to get people to see things and films that are viewable in libraries. And that's the only reason we use YouTube, is because it is still usable in libraries, which is the lowest common denominator for quite a lot of people. So,
Franzi, would you like to step in with your
Yes. What I wanted to add about interviewing people, what I always do is, well, apart from if you're doing Vox Pops, because then everything's going really fast, but if you're interviewing people, or if I'm interviewing people, I'm first of all taking some time to just chat to them. So I think the worst thing you can do is go there and be like, hi, yes, this is my camera, by the way, and let's start now. Answer this question. So that's, in my opinion, the worst thing you can do. So first of all, I have a little chat, and for people to get comfortable and forget the camera. And the good thing about that is also that sometimes you find out things you have known before and that you could ask in the interview.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to add was that I tried using SoundCloud quite a lot. And what I really like about SoundCloud and using audio for that is that you can add links. So once I had an audio file and I added links, so I was talking about a video in the audio, and when I did that, I added the link to the video, and I really like that. So you can combine links with the audio, which is really useful.
That's actually quite an interesting approach, and I suppose thinking about it, you can do similar in YouTube, can't you? You can stick those fat buttons on the top of the YouTube as people point things out. So you could do a similar thing there. It's interesting because Dan's approach, physically in terms of how you're holding the camera, is quite different to what I remember from the Media 2012 thing. I'm not sure if it was John or Franzi who was doing a quick workshop on there, but it was the kind of this thing. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
Or do I just look like an idiot now? But actually, whether you're holding it on the end of a stick, pointing it back towards you, or whether you're doing that, even if you're doing that, you have to have a sense of Zen understanding of kind of having some confidence that you are pointing it towards them, because you're not able to see what you're doing if you're doing that, are you?
You know, one stark difference as well from, I think, what John was saying. I'm not so much an activist. I keep a very, especially with the political coverage that I gave a very neutral perspective. And I was more interested in the stories that the national media here in the US did not cover, such as the people that would attend those events and why they were there. That's the reason that the politicians come to New Hampshire in the first place. Although the media here certainly does not really, I mean, they do their requisite interviews with locals, but they're not here for the local story. And that's one way that I stood out. And I'm actually going to share a link to the examples from this most recent there in the chat.
Yeah. Okay, so I can see that. Others can, because I think the chat just pops open. So yeah. So
it's really interesting. Can I just dive in there, Dan? You were talking about that as well. We had a situation where we tend to, you know, my viewpoint on it is that when I stand there and point the camera at an event, we're still the only people in Leicester to have filmed a whole Pride parade go past.
Okay.
And a carnival. And we tend to cover those kind of things, you know, because they're people that are kind of getting experience as community reporters, we call them. We don't call ourselves citizens journalists, we call ourselves community reporters. And I remember we had the troops came back from a posting overseas, and it caused quite a bit of controversy here. And I stood at the edge. I just managed to get inside the cordon and stood there, and I made 2 10-minute YouTube films. And I remember our Lord Mayor, who's a lady called Councillor Manjula Sood, and she kind of winked at me as she walked past, and I've got it on film. It was quite funny. And there was all the mainstream media were running up and down as the parade was going on and the music and stuff. And I just stood there, and I remember I think I turned around a few times and filmed the crowd and then filmed that. And many months later, she came up to me and she said, "John, I don't remember much about the experience because obviously as the Lord Mayor, I was involved in it and all that kind of stuff." She said, "But I remember watching your 10-minute videos and realising just what an event it was." She said, "Because you weren't running about, you actually literally captured it." And I think sometimes our role as community reporters is to say, if you weren't there, this is what it was like. And if you were, we captured it accurately. And it's then how we spread it out from there by getting comments and people to view in and being the portal for other people to share their experiences. You know, and Citizens Eye really is a platform. Yeah, my role is to provide a platform to other people. I don't do anything for other people apart from allowing them to take out of it what they want and feed into it. And we have, like, you know, ethics and sort of, you know, rules and regs around, like, you know, what you can and you can't say, all common sense stuff, which ultimately with our younger reporters we say to them, just makes you a better person in having a conversation with people. So we take our role very seriously, but we also know what we're not. You know, we're not the mainstream media, and we never have tried to be. And, you know, we've had all sorts of weird and wonderful situations where we were paid for 15 months to have a page every week by our local newspaper, and then they pulled the funding. You know, we've been on Radio Leicester, and they've supported my documentary film festival and our community media week and put on films and stuff like that. And I think it's by knowing exactly why you do what you do, rather than we're not trying to be the alternative to the mainstream media. We're trying to be the platform that allows the stuff that won't get in the mainstream media because it's not maybe titillation or sexual or, you know, graphic or all the things that we know sells mainstream media. That's where our role comes from, you know.
Do you actually, not just John, but anybody who's doing this kind of stuff, do you take your lead of what you're going to go out and film based on what you want to do, or feedback you get from people? I mean, in the same way that people may write stories because there's been a lot of local interest about a certain political issue or something like that, for example.
We tend to get a lot of requests from people. Oh, the mainstream media never turns up to our event, so will you come? And I learned early on that if I was not about to create 40 community reporters sitting in a newsroom waiting to go out and cover events, that the best thing to do was to actually go back to those people and say, well, why don't you come for some free training to our community news cafe, and we'll give you the skills to capture that yourself. And I think that's probably been the one reason why we've been quite successful, is because it's not about us capturing the news. It's about giving people the skills to capture it themselves and really find their own voice and then shape what the world sees about themselves, you know?
That's an interesting distinction that I'm actually wrestling with right now, is how to train people to take out their iPhone or their Android and capture video, and how to compose the story. One distinction between you and I, John, how I would have covered an event like a parade. I wouldn't necessarily film the whole thing, but would kind of walk along with people and try to interact, again, in that same style, holding the camera so that we're side by side. I'll try to dig up some examples of other protest marches that I've
well, that was a static parade that happened. Since then, we've covered 2 protests by the EDL. Some of you might know what that is, and Dan, for you, that's like the far right here, like English Defence League. They're sort of, you know, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And a lot of that. The first time we had 17 people go out and capture that from photography at both ends, the people against the fascists and then the people at the EDL end. And we were involved and treated by the police like the mainstream media, so we went along like the paper and the radio. The second time, we ran a community media hub for people to come and drop their stories off that we loaded up on the site and stuff like that, because we were all photographed from the first time, and we're all targets. And so that was quite interesting. We found ourselves and various of our reporters in pictures and stuff like that. So we were very aware of that. You know, it was our community, and we were doing that. But the far right weren't visiting Leicester to protest. They're here all the time, and I think, you know, we've been trying to advocate since then that these people are given an opportunity to have a voice, because the mere fact of excluding them makes them more of an issue, maybe. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Franzi, could you tell us a bit more about how that ebook came about? Was that something you did off your own back, or?
It was actually my MA project for the online journalism at BCU.
Okay.
And what I did was do some workshops in and around Birmingham for citizen journalists and communities and so on, and everyone who was interested, giving workshops to them in video journalism. And I really learned a lot from them and from those workshops, and everything I learned there, and in addition to that, interviews with some other people and experts, as for example John, which was really, really cool, and really helpful, are written down in that book. So it's like, it's not a book about which content you should have in the workshop. So like first hour do this, and the second hour storytelling, and it's more about the whole things around the workshop. So how to approach things, and I had wrong approaches in the beginning, and I really learned a lot from that. That was really interesting.
Yeah, so I was going to say, so the ebook in itself, does it describe the training materials, but also have findings in it that you've discovered alongside doing the workshops, or?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So it doesn't explain what content you should have in the workshop. So it's really not about that. It's really about the stuff around it. So how to hold the workshops,
right?
What you have to be careful about. So for example, in the beginning, I was giving too much information, and I was expecting too many people. I thought, well, yeah, if people are doing hyperlocal journalism, I'm sure everyone is interested in video, and that's not how it is.
Yeah.
And all those people who are interested in video are not planning on doing a documentary or something, and they don't want to know about Final Cut Pro or about every single editing tip. They often just want to know the basic stuff.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I learned amongst a lot of other things. And so it was really, really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about the basic editing tips, because I used to love iMovie. I used to love iMovie before they made it look like Final Cut Pro, or before they tried to stretch it. And years ago, I used to write books for a publisher called Friends of Ed in Birmingham, and like books on graphic design and things like that. And I think I was famous for having written their second worst selling book, which was an iMovie book, which interestingly I pitched to them and said, look, there's lots of kind of iMovie for dummies, but there's actually quite a lot you can do with iMovie. And this was like early versions of it. But what I also always appreciated about it was just that, just the simplicity of it, just how it was so lovely. And now it's just they've done the kind of black design, and it's just overblown and it's completely unnecessary now. But I mean, a lot of the time you can just edit in what you need to do in QuickTime Player anyway, and just do it as simply as that. I was actually quite frustrated recently because I got a new camera over Christmas and kind of shot some stuff, plugged it in, went to download the MOVs or whatever file types I thought it was going to be, and thought I'll just drag them off the SD card, and then realised it was a Sony and it used its own bespoke kind of file system, and you couldn't just drag the files off as video files. You had to capture them through iMovie and do it like that. So I mean, it sounds like a little thing, but it's one thing to look out for people sort of buying new kit, kind of all things like the file types that get exported out of them and things like that. Franzi, kind of, can you think off the top of your head what would be the top 3 tips you might give somebody who is training people up in doing citizen journalism? Because it sounds like that's the kind of thing that Dan's looking towards doing, training more people up. And
I don't know if you said it, John. I think it was you telling me in the interviews that you shouldn't stand in front of them like the professional expert and being there as the teacher and saying, yeah, this is how we do video and this is how we cut and so on. So it has to be a really comfortable situation, a comfortable workshop instead of like a school situation. And that's what I figured out, that makes much more sense. And what's really important and what works really well is having a conversation instead of a PowerPoint presentation or something. And what's crucial is feedback. So if you just stand in front of those people and you're telling them how it works, but they can't show you their videos, or they can't get feedback from what they've done already, or they can't ask questions about which camera to use, or, well, only think about all those editing programs you've got. Some are using a Mac, so they have got iMovie. Others are using Windows, so they can't do anything with iMovie. So I think what's really important is to rather have a smaller group and see what that group needs, and really focus on their needs so that they get the most out of the workshop, instead of standing in front of 20 people and telling them, like, just talking for 2 hours without stopping and going home after that. That doesn't really make sense. So what I, for example, offered those guys in the workshops was to send me links of their videos to get feedback or something like that. So, and well, I didn't get a lot of links, but all that feedback stuff in the workshops, I think, was quite important, and also to answer particular questions instead of just sitting down, making your keynote and leaving again. That doesn't work, in my opinion.
Okay.
And simplicity is really important. So don't expect other people to know what you know, because if you've done video for a few years, you're talking about other stuff than when you just started. So after 4 years, you know stuff that you haven't even heard of when you just started. So some people, some stuff that might be totally normal to you might be totally unknown to others, and that's just, sometimes you just don't realize it. You stand there and you're like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, what the hell is she talking about? And that's really important to think about that.
Any questions or comments from Ali, Guy, or Nikki? Anything particularly you'd like to dig into, kind of how people are doing this? Or?
I mean, from my point of view, I guess it's. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I think from I tend to find that the video is kind of quite a high stakes thing, both for local people maybe, and also for I mean, we've talked about that a little bit, how you give people confidence to actually just be in a video, if you like. But there's also the thing about it's actually quite hard to produce, and that comes back to sort of bouncing back down to audio, if you like, and all the rest of it. If you haven't got much time, even to edit a really simple video, sometimes it feels easier from a producer's point of view just to do a bit of audio. And so we've, but I don't know if anybody else has experience of this, but it's kind of like when you look at traffic stats, not very many people really listen to audio relative to video. Video is way more engaging and kind of more accessible. So there's a real kind of, I don't know, from our point of view, I've always found there's a bit of a tension there. We're trying to go, well, what's the project that we're going to do that's going to make video worthwhile, if you know what I mean? Because it's definitely worth doing, but it requires just a little bit more investment for everybody, to get stuck into, if you like. So, the link that I put up there, the last videos we put up, obviously, Green Elite is slightly more towards the sort of social activism side of things as well. It's not just trying to report the news, and so we got a bit of funding to do our last project. It only cost 600 quid or something to make the videos. That was quite fun because we put a bit of effort into it, if you like, and almost sort of storyboarded them a wee bit, and went out and got some rewards from local businesses for people doing good stuff, and went about handing out free vouchers to people who picked up their dog poo and litter and stuff. And it was a wee campaign. It was a wee campaign. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't really news reporting per se, but it certainly got everybody talking and what have you. So slightly different. I mean, it's not necessarily citizen journalism as many people think of it as it were.
It's interesting what you say about sort of the investment in doing something like video, because for me, I have written a couple of stories for the Hyperlocal where I live, WV11, and at one point, having kind of worked on one which is yet to go up, and I don't know if it will, but and also at a citizen journalism conference the other day, or a meeting the other day, somebody made the point that it's a lot harder to do video, and for me it's actually a lot simpler to point a camera at somebody and not have to then think about how I craft however many words into something, like typing something up. It's a lot simpler. If you're comparing kind of a written article to a piece of video, it would be a lot more straightforward and intuitive for me to just knock out some video that maybe doesn't tell exactly the same story. But
yeah, well, I kind of know what you mean, and I can see increasingly that as everything gets cheaper and easier, so much of it's about having like really simple kit and a really simple workflow worked out. And actually, at least in my experience, not coming from that background, it's quite difficult to kind of figure all that out, if you like. And I did get to the point where I had a really crappy little sort of dictaphone with a camera attached to it and a USB cable that was never going to be lost because it was permanently attached to it, and it really was point and shoot. But the first videos that we had, the workflow was hideous. The first video cameras that I used, the workflow was hideous, and the files were huge and the nightmare to edit.
Oh yeah, you can just.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because I got really excited recently because I realised that people were actually starting to do what I thought should have been possible a long time ago, which was Wi-Fi cameras.
Yeah.
And just for the last 3 years, I've been thinking, why has nobody kind of done away with having to kind of use wires to plug cameras in and things? And now I think there's a Galaxy camera or something like that. I don't know, but I think Samsung do a few of them, not wanting to specifically advertise anyone, obviously. But
price sequel.
I think anything that's wireless is a winner, personally.
Yeah, so there's an element of the tech which I think is kind of, it'd be really nice to have a simple tech guide out there for people getting started in a way. And they're going, you don't need all this stuff. Because if you speak to a professional filmmaker, quite often they tell you that you need to have a whole lot of stuff you don't need. And I think we've kind of established that maybe. But then after that, it's really dealing with the confidence issue, and that's the same almost regardless of what medium you're using. It's giving people permission to feel that they can.
I've often gone to things thinking, I'll just stick a camera in somebody's face and do a bit of a YouTube. And the best, because of my confidence issue with it, the best I can often do is a bit of audio boo, if that.
Yeah.
So, Dan, can you just give us so the political videos. I mean, you talked about a 4-day period when you did 59 videos.
Yeah.
Outside of that, are you also regularly doing stuff? And you're doing stuff for one specific hyperlocal, your hyperlocal website, is it? Or?
Well, the website, the local website is one that I created and has admittedly not received much attention from me over the past several months. I've been adapting a lot of the skills that I've developed covering events and social situations to more of a commercial pursuit. Working with this local digital agency to develop video content. I, I, I owe everything that I've done to covering social events and really trying to hone the skills of telling a story using video as the medium. But just out of the natural process, I've kind of moved it back into the agency world and have. This has really always been the direction that I've been heading since I first conjured the idea back in 2000 when I was spending time abroad in the Netherlands. I wanted a way to share the experience. And so I came back and started teaching myself anything I could. I taught myself graphic design and web development and CSS, and that led into video production. And so, it has taken this much time for technology to catch up, but I'm exceptionally excited about it because it is so easy and straightforward to create content. And that content it's more than just a commercial pursuit. I mean, it really becomes about our individual stories. And I think the challenge to us is how we thread those stories together and how we demonstrate the connective tissue between those stories. So, in your case, it seems as though there's a really strong community of diverse backgrounds, and so with what you're doing, John, you're bringing together these marginalized groups and giving them a voice, and that's really my takeaway, is that the technology gives more people a way to get their story out, and that's incredibly powerful. I mean, me with a little camera and a website that I started, I get access to events as press. I get into presidential debates, and there is an element of power. There's certainly a responsibility that comes with that.
And how do you get that access? Is it just because people recognize you, or because they see you as non-threatening, or?
Well, I go through the process and I contact the media contacts and I request credentials, and most of the time I'm granted credentials. And so there's a process to go through it, and any good journalist will know that process that adds an air of legitimacy to it. But the challenge for individuals like us is that the larger outlets kind of look down at people like us. There's this stigma that they place on us that we're not really serious, or we don't have any value because nobody's giving us a paycheck. But I frankly, I turn the camera around at them because that to me, that's as interesting, especially around the primary, is to turn the camera back around and show behind the scenes of how the media here spins a story. I mean, I can walk through the spin room, they call it, after a presidential debater, and you can see how the mechanism works and how what was said in the debate hall is taken into the spin room and turned into their official talking points. And it's fascinating to be in a room like that and then to go home and turn on the news and see how that message has changed from the moment I was there, seeing it for myself, and then how it's reported back.
Dan, can I ask you? It's really interesting because you're talking about the politics and stuff like that. I mean, where we are in Leicester, we've got a situation where we've got an elected mayor. I think it was only like the second or third time it had happened, whatever it was, and we covered that election, and we get seen as being the people that do the stories that like the local BBC radio and the Mercury doesn't do. And I notice Simon's online as well down there. And the thing is, what happens then? Hi mate, you're right. And what happens then is when you get into a situation where you've gone beyond being a voice in the chatter to being something that people see as being credible, then that's not necessarily whether that's the mainstream media that sees you as being credible, but people that you see every day as you go about events see you being.
Oh, did you freeze, John? I lost you there.
Yeah, John has frozen. I don't know if anybody else has. No, everyone else is still moving. Maybe okay. John will probably drop out, I think. So.
But he brings up an interesting point about the legitimacy of hyperlocal citizen journalism, however he terms it.
Yeah, and I mean, I find it interesting. I don't know how many other people think they would be able to go through the same process in the UK of getting a press pass and walking into a press briefing and covering it as a hyperlocal. I don't know if other people have got that kind of experience, or
at a national government level.
Yeah, I guess so, because this is what we're talking about, isn't it, Simon?
National government, I would have thought, would be very difficult. Most journalists who want to get into the briefings who work for the Nationals can't get into those.
Yeah.
So I don't know hyperlocals. I mean, the Americans did seem to go really gung ho on citizen journalism, bloggers, about 4 years ago, maybe a little bit more, where they all got slightly obsessed with having, I think, because they saw them as influencers. You know, if there's anything that a politician wants, it's to influence people, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe there's, I don't know, Dan. But I was going to say maybe there's a flavour that a lot of people in America are cynical of the very polished news sources, and so there's a sense that politicians might want to woo the hyperlocals who can come in and be seen to be giving an authentic, unpolished, gritty, real voice or something of what's actually going on. I don't know, getting under the skin, I don't know.
I don't know. I kind of interpret, especially the American media, almost as a puppet. You know, there's a long relationship between politics and news media in this country, and as I'm sure there is in the UK. But the amount of perspective or the perspective that's being offered by hyperlocal journalists is, you know, this is something that's new. It gives an honest view of topics and allows people to find a news source that they can, you know, based on their own processing of information, trust you as a journalist, whomever you may be. So along those lines, you know, putting yourself in front of the camera if you're shooting video is a great way to get yourself in front of those people, because they come to recognize your face as well as your voice, as well as your Twitter handle, as well as, you know, whatever other content you're putting out there. And if you notice some of the videos that I post, I have what I call bookends on the beginning and trailing end of every video that I produce, something to reinforce how people can find me, who I am, my website, and I give that out just as, you know, kind of as a branding mark.
Yeah. One more sort of, and I'm going on a bit, but the question. So you may have said this already. You're doing video on your own hyperlocal. So as well as that, are you also doing kind of text stories like normal blog posts?
It's something that I'm trying to challenge myself to do for work, but not
Okay.
not on a hyperlocal basis.
Okay. So I guess what I was getting at was I wonder whether there is, or people know of anybody who's ever kind of started getting into doing video stories instead of normal blog posts, and has kind of gone the whole way and kind of eventually rejected their blogging altogether and just gone to video, and maybe even rejected their blog entirely and just ended up as a YouTube channel. I wonder. I can't think of any hyperlocals that are just YouTube channels, but Simon, Ali, anybody you might know of some?
I'm afraid not. No, I mean, as I say, I think well, ages ago, it's one Talk About Local a long time ago. I remember Simon talking about how he used to just get the fire brigade or the police press releases and just batter them up without doing any topping or tailing or passing them off as his own journalism. And I always thought that was excellent because it is a lot more honest in a way just to take those press releases and just say this is what they're saying.
Yeah.
And so that at one end is like really probably the ultimate cheap hyper. That's almost like that's aggregation really. But you're going from there right the way up to video, and from my point of view, I do think video is still just, in a way, it's getting easier, and as you know, if people have the workflow right, it's getting better. But there's still especially at hyperlocal when the economics are so tight. If you get a wee news update which is 4 paragraphs of text from the local councillor, you're not going to make a video about that. You're going to
no, unless you read it to camera or something, doing an impression of the councillor.
Yeah. I mean, the most economic, sensible thing to do with your time is just to go, bam, there you go.
Yeah.
And so it's horses for courses. I mean, for me, it's working out where video fits in. You want to have a mixture of everything, I think. And there's definitely, as the web is getting more visual in terms of video and photography and multimedia, I think. So it's something that all hyperlocals probably have to think about. But I haven't come to terms exactly with how it fits, if you know what I mean. My workflow isn't adapted to do it right, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
There's one huge advantage of... Oh, sorry, no, go ahead.
Sorry. Just one thing. I think it's important to... Well, the good thing about web is that you've got a lot of alternatives you can choose. So when you work at a TV station, you're doing every single topic as a video. So, for example, the council meeting, which is a really boring topic for a video. Or, I don't know, anything else. And the cool thing about web is that you can choose between a lot of alternatives. So you can make audio, video, text, photos. And just as Ali said, it really depends on the topic and when it makes sense to make video. And I think that's the important thing to think about that. If it's worth it doing a video, if there's good pictures, or if there's a reason for why you are doing video. And if it's just a few people sitting around a table talking, it might be better to write a text, in my opinion.
Yeah.
One interesting...
Okay,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say one huge advantage of video is that as opposed to text, your stories can't be lifted without accreditation. If you've got it sealed in a bit of video, then all that can be done is people play that video, rather than just rewrite it slightly and it's theirs. So that there is although there is the slightly higher time costs of creating video, you have bonuses in owning the content.
One thing that, to your point, I don't know if you tend to, or if you all are using iPhones or Androids, but I use an app on my iPhone called Videolicious, which allows me to snap some images with the device, or take some video, and then I can select which clips I want to use in telling a story. So the process is you snap some images, you save those to your camera roll, you launch Videolicious, and you tell your story directly to the device. And as you're going, you tap the thumbnail for whatever clips it reinforce what you're discussing. So you can quickly go to a a city council event, get an image of each councillor, and then take that, go through the process, talk about whatever it is that you are going to discuss for the night, and then you have your report done quickly, and you can post that nearly immediately without having to write. I'm always looking for ways to not write text.
And of course, no discussion about hyperlocal video would be complete without mentioning Vine.
I was going to say, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
GIFs or something, because I'm convinced animated GIF makers are the future of hyperlocal reporting.
Can you put audio with animated GIFs?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, actually. It's quite funny, really, because it's like Google Plus is the new home for animated GIFs, and it seems like Twitter's going to be the new home for animated video with Vine. But I'm just actually quite happy at the moment. I'm an Android user. I don't have to decide whether I want Vine or not because it's only iPhone. Because I don't want to feel like I'm going to start playing with something new. But
there are some extremely creative people out there using Vine in unique ways that have really impressed. Well,
we've heard about all the porn already. Yeah.
That's it's too bad because there are some people that are actually doing some creative things, filmmaking, and challenging the way that you construct a story. And one thing that I do have to say about the 6-second format is that it challenges you to think differently about how you construct a story and how you assemble a visual composition.
Yeah. No, I'm sure it does. I was actually intrigued by the method of making them, because you kind of hold your thumb down for like a 1 second, and then you take it off, and then you hold it down for another second, and then it puts them all together. Is that right? Or
yeah, you hold it down as long as you wanna shoot the video. Yeah. It's pretty. I tried it today for the first time, and it's pretty cool. I really love it. So, and I wanted to ask anyway what you guys think about Vine for the use in hyperlocal journalism, because I think it could be really, really cool. I don't know.
Well, what are you going to get beyond
6-second video? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're getting a yes/no
we're
answer.
talking about Vine.
So I love that. We started back in the late 90s. Started a TV production company, web TV production company, or broadband TV as it used to be called then, and it's called Lemon TV. And one of the things we did was 60-second TV. So maybe 6-second TV is the way forward now. The attention spans are now so much shorter. You have to divide it by a factor of 10 to 6-second TV.
It's not even the MTV generation anymore. It's the Vine generation.
It's the M generation.
Yeah.
The TVs takes too long to say. So
yeah, definitely. No, I mean, I would have thought with Vine, what can you do? You can, in terms of citizen journalism, you can either capture the moment when, the car explodes or the person's being shot in those extreme cases, or you can do a vox pop, and that's it. I'd have thought.
Yeah.
You can also what I did today when I arrived from the airport. I just took a few seconds of video, and then I closed the screen again, and then like 15 minutes later, when I arrived in New Street, I shot the next piece of it. So you can really wait like 30 minutes between it if you want, and that's the cool thing. And as Dan said, what I really like as well is that you have to think about what you can do best with those 6 seconds. And I was really thinking about, okay, how should I hold the camera? Should I hold it to my suitcase, or where should I do it on New Street or here? I really love that. I mean, 6 seconds is not that, but it totally fits with Twitter, because you only got 140 signs there, and then you've got 6. I love it. I think it's really cool.
Dan's got a wry grin on his face, so I think he's making a Vine right now.
I'm trying to share the link with you.
Yeah, exactly. You see?
Of course, the other side of the equation is, of course, that there are like time lapse apps as well on iPhone. So, you can do 6 seconds, or you could do a whole day with your phone really easily and share that to video too. And both of those things have a lot of possibility really for sharing news stories, if you know what I mean. But I haven't fully explored them yet either. So,
funnily enough, we went for a walk on Saturday because it was sunny, and my daughter, who is now 12, and she did a stop motion of our whole walk.
Yeah.
Which did a really good job of flattening the battery on my phone. But the results on it are quite fun. You know, you sort of get this staccato version. In fact, it's like going back to a really early version of film, isn't it? Where you have this really disjointed experience through ridiculously advanced technology. You know what? Thinking about this 6-second thing, I think that's actually quite interesting for sum up each news story in 6 seconds.
Yeah.
And just blast those things out in the day. Or just here's the story in 6 seconds.
But you also have the opportunity because, and it doesn't seem to work in all cases, but the loop is a really effective way if you adapt cognitive studies into how you structure a story. You can have a really quick instance that may not be perceptible to the viewer on the first round, but because it loops in a 6-second loop, I mean, we're talking about propaganda and mind control techniques, but it's a way it's a way to adapt what is is essentially an effective way to communicate a message. That type of repetition. Yes, again, back to the responsibility side of this, but still, you can, within that 6-second loop, you can embed information that can be deciphered once it's viewed 3 or 4 times.
Dan, that one you just stuck up there, is that 6 seconds, or do you do it shorter there?
That's shorter than 6 seconds.
It can be shorter,
and it's not very good. I'm still practicing and getting used to how I structure these things.
No, I quite like it. Dan, I'm assuming you're on Twitter, are you? What's your?
Yeah, everything except for Google Plus is my friend Dan. So I'm my friend Dan on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Vine.
Is it my friend as opposed to my Freund?
Yes, it's the English spelling. My friend Dan.
Okay. Okay. There you go. Right.
I'm going to have to sign off myself and finish up my day. But I'm really encouraged by the group that you have here, and it seems like you've done a lot of work already on this hyperlocal topic, and I'm looking forward to continuing this dialogue with you all.
Yeah, well, I mean, I set up this kind of as a half personal thing, but it also feeds into our research project that I'm involved with, and that Dave, who was on here before, is involved with. And that's the URL there, creativecitizens.co.uk, and it explores much broader things than hyperlocal anyway. Yeah, it'd be great to have you back another time. I mean, next week we may be talking about a completely different aspect of hyperlocal. We've yet to decide really, so but hopefully you've enjoyed yourself. And,
great.
So what time is it in America at the moment? Is it like middle of the afternoon? Or?
It is 5:30, and most of my colleagues have started to leave the office.
Yeah, it's looking dark through your window, through your back window.
But I will also, I posted an update to the event page with links to the examples that I mentioned, the film festival, the primary coverage, and also a protest march that was actually the first time I turned the camera back at myself.
Okay.
But really looking forward to continuing this. I can see somebody needs my attention before I get to go home.
See you, Dan. We'll tweet you with details of how you can get stuff later. So thanks.
All right, that sounds good.
See you, Dan.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.
I like the way. So I was just going to say I like the way, because he's kind of in America, it feels like he's come from America to come to the hangout, and so we will have to say goodbye to him and like wave a hanky at him or something. But,
thanks for making all that extra effort of getting your bits to travel so far.
Yeah,
from America all the way over to us.
Yeah.
Well, I would just like to say this was my first hangout, so thanks, guys.
Oh, great.
That was lovely.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah. Well, there were teething troubles at the beginning, but that's
yeah.
great.
For some reason, I innocently thought that this would go well this week, and every week there's been some kind of issue. But basically, I started to hang out like I did last week, assuming that I would be able to start broadcasting it, and you can't for some reason. Having set it up as an event, you can't then put it on air. So I'll just have to collect whoever wants to go in the hangout each week, and then start another one on air, and then invite people separately again. But worked in the
I'll
end.
figure it out. Well, yeah, thanks very much, Jeremy.
Okay.
Really cool. I'll join that more often as well. It's funny that I'm in England right now, but also when I'm back in Germany, I'll definitely join that because it's really, really interesting.
Okay, great.
Really good stuff. Yeah.
Okay, doke. See you then.
All right. See you
Bye.
then, guys. Bye.
See you soon.
And then there were two, Simon.
Yeah.
Right.
I think
Okay.
I've had a
So
very heavy day.
what are we going to get into for the last hour then?
Staying away competitions.
No. I think we could probably call it a day, given that there's just the two of us.
Yeah.
But thanks for dropping in. I realised that I invited you a bit late when we were already halfway through it, and because
Hey, there's no problem. I was on a phone call. It's an hour-long phone call, and it's all.
Okay. Cool.
It's just been it's been a pretty intense day.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Good. Thanks again.
If you think of anything good, I mean, assuming you fancy it next week, but if you think of any good topics for next week, the reason we steered away from what we had been thinking about was because, hold on, let's just end the broadcast.